Yeah, sir.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So today we have a session on MDDS and NDHB. I think MDDS is not a new concept and I have covered it plenty of times. So I would like it to be an interactive session rather than I keep telling about MDDS. So I will like to start with a basic question from analyst team. What is your understanding about MDDS standard? Raghav, can you tell me?
Sir, it is actually the basic set of standards that is given by the government of India to follow the particular pattern across the domains. All of this is given, like what should be the elements, what should the element size, and these are the standards that need to be followed. They have recommended it to be followed.
Anyone else?
Sir, MDDS, as per my knowledge, it is a set of minimum information, a set of standards set by the government and given to the organizations to follow the standard, and it explains what the information should be, what type it should be, like integer or alphabetical, what type of information it should be, and it helps in locating the information and makes it easier to manage data.
Okay, so MDDS is basically metadata and data standards. So as you know that this is a standard related to data, and metadata is the description of data, data about data. So whenever we are designing any application, we need to develop an information model. So information model means, what all, tables we need to generate, what all data elements we need to define, what all data we need to capture. So this all, is part of the information model definition. So currently what is happening is, whoever is the architect who is designing the application, they develop the database as per their own understanding. So they take some field length, some type, some size, based on their own understanding of the application. So somewhere like in one application, the patient name can be 50 character. Somewhere in other application, this can be 30 character. So something like this is currently what is going on. So when we need to exchange the data from one application to another. So the problem comes, when we have different format of data. So for example, in one application, one developer took, gender code as 1 for male, 2 for female, 3 for unknown. In another application, some other developer designed the table and he put the gender codes as M for male, F for female, U for unknown. So when they want to exchange the data with each other, so what they will do? They will not understand what this 1 means or what this M means. So they need to put the translation tables. And a lot of runtime translations are required to make the common understanding between the two applications. So this kind of mapping is done at the point-to-point level. So whenever we are integrating application A with application B, so we are making a common understanding of their master tables, and we are doing these runtime translations and mappings. Now imagine this is between two applications. Now if we need to integrate the whole lot of applications across the country, so how many point-to-point integrations would be required? So there is a formula for that. And the formula says that if you have n systems to integrate, you need n multiplied by n minus 1 divided by 2. So many point-to-point integrations will be required. So that simply means, okay, if you have, let us say, 4 applications you are integrating, then you need 4 multiplied by 3 divided by 2, which is 6. 6 places you need all these integrations. You need to understand their common masters. You need to do the mappings. You need to do the translations. Only then these applications will understand with each other. So these are the practical challenges where like each application has its own data format and there is no common meaning of data across the applications. So to solve this problem, MDDS standard was evolved. So MDDS was not a new thing. Before Health Ministry, what you call NEGP. So they asked all the 16 ministries to develop the metadata for their respective domains and publish it. So then, committees were constituted under each ministry, and they were assigned the task of defining the data model, and for data model to define the metadata of those data elements. So as part of that, Ministry of Health was entrusted with the task of making one committee, and this was called the MDDS Committee for Health. And they were also given the task to define all the data elements related to health domain. So what happened is during the task, what all these committees found is there were certain common set of elements which are common across all the different domains. So for example, date or time. Now date and time is required in all the domains, whether it is health domain or whether it is Panchayati Raj, land region or any other, you need to capture the date or time. So they identified all these common elements and they made it as a generic element. So generic elements are common elements which are applicable to all the domains. And then whatever elements are specific to a domain, those were kept in the respective domains. So please feel free to ask any question. I don't want to make it a one-sided lecture. Any questions, Raghav, Akriti?
No, sir.
Then I will ask the question, right?
Sir.
Okay, so I will ask the question. So you are already working on MDDS tables. So can you tell me how many code directories are there? How many elements are there?
So 141 code directories.
141.
Okay. And how many data elements?
Data elements. Data elements तो बहुत है.
So there are total 1077 data elements which are grouped into 39 entities. So entities are the logical grouping of data elements based on their purpose. Like all the patient related attributes come in the patient entity. Same way all the observation related data elements come in observation entity and so on. So total 1077 data elements. They are classified into 39 entities. And then as you said, 141 code directories. So can some of you tell me like what is code directory, what is value set, what is value list? So different things are used here. Can someone tell me? Raghav?
So the code directories are actually like you said, sir, for the patient entity, we have patient entity like body size, the list of medicines. These are the code directories, and the value sets are basically what is inside the code directories, like the list of all the essential medicines, like the alternate ID. For alternate ID, the list is PAN card. These are the value sets.
I would say it this way. So code directory is a place where you define all the codes, related to a particular concept or a value domain, I would say. And then value set is a constrained set of data values which come out of the code directory. So for example, if there are finite number of elements in a value domain, we generally call it a set, value set. So set, set is a collection in Java, Ved will teach you in Java class, which consists of all the non-duplicated unique values. Value set means set of all the values. So generally what we do is, if for example, gender code. Now gender code, there are 3 codes which are defined. M for male, F for female, and then T for transgender, which ideally should be changed to U, unknown. So there are only 3 or 4 values there. So you don't need a whole, set of whole table for that basically. It's just a simple list, or, in the UI, it will look like a drop down with a finite set of values. Mm-hmm. So we call it value set. But then there are other things like, for example, ICD-10 code directory. It has more than 75,000 codes. So we cannot contain it in a single, list kind of thing. We need to contain it in a table. And then we need to do the, interaction with the table to fetch all these values. So code directory generally contain a large set of, values. Value set on the other side contain the finite set of limited number of, values, for which you don't need a table kind of thing. So if you can see this this diagram, this whole MDDS standard come from one ISO standard. We call it 11179, ISO 11179. So when we defined, so I'm saying the word we because Dr. Pankaj and I was part of that committee. So we followed the ISO standard, and this ISO standard described the mechanism of publishing, defining the metadata, publishing the metadata, and in all these things related to metadata. If you have to set up a database to publish the metadata, how this database should look like, what will be the specification of the database, everything is defined under ISO 11179, and it's an international standard, ISO standard. So if you see this table, this diagram, everything in a particular domain, we call it a conceptual domain. And we identify the entities in a particular domain. Now, for example, pharmacy order. Now, pharmacy order is one entity. Now, pharmacy order, if you see, it has two things here. So one is so pharmacy order can have many things basically. Order, it can have many attributes. So one example is, for example, frequency of medication. So frequency of medication is a concept in that particular value domain. Conceptual domain. And frequency of medicine can have a, any, value which come from a finite set of list. So for example, something can be, BD, QD, generally doctor write this way, once a time, twice a time, thrice a time, once a week. So these kind of, frequencies are defined. So this is a list of, values which are applicable to this data element. So generally, this concept and the value domain together form the data element. So what I mean is, let us say if I am defining frequency of medication as one data element in the database, so I need to understand one, what is the format of this data element, what is the length, what is the size, what is the type. Two, I need to know if it is constrained by a finite set of value. So when I'm saying constrained by finite set of value, it means it cannot take any value. It has to take the value from a list. So it is constrained by that list. So that means frequency of medication, I cannot enter anything XYZ. It has to take any one value out of the list, like once a time, twice a time, something like that, BD, QD, so on. So this is called value domain. So concept plus value domain forms the data element. So generally in MDDS, we identified the conceptual domains, which we call as the entities. So there were 39 entities we identified. So you can say each entity like a conceptual domain. Then under the conceptual domain, we identified the different concepts. And then we identified how many of those concepts require a value set or a code directory for that. So this is another example, for example. So diagnosis we identified as, one entity. You can see like out of the 39 entities, diagnosis is one entity in the MDDS. Now diagnosis can have many attributes. So you can have a diagnosis code, you can have a diagnosis description, and so on. So basically these are all the concepts. Now, as you know that diagnosis cannot have any value. Diagnosis is constrained by a directory. Basically the value should come from a code directory, which we call as the ICD-10. So as MDDS, we recommended that ICD-10 should be the source of, values for diagnosis in India. Nowadays, we are talking that ICD-11 should be the source of diagnosis. So this concept is health condition code or diagnosis code, and the value domain is ICD-10 code directory. Together, it defines the data element, which we call as the diagnosis code, or simply said, health condition code. Any question here?
Can you also talk about object class and attribute?
Yeah, so this is a little bit, at a more deeper level. So whenever we are defining the concept, so ultimately it comes from the object-oriented paradigm. So yesterday we had covered like, so everything, so we can consider like an object.
Yes, of course.
So before the object-oriented concept, we used to think everything in terms of variables.
Okay.
And, as yesterday's class, we had covered, there was a functional programming or procedural programming concept. So what people used to think is each thing they will define like a variable, and then they will manipulate those variable in a procedure or in a program. So they were more focused on the functions and the variables. But then challenges were like, the scope of the variables, they were not able to manage it because, the one reusability was limited, the other was the scope was constrained. So somewhere, I'm using one variable, then, the same variable is changed by some other program accidentally or, unintentionally. So those were challenges.
Okay.
So what, people thought is, why not, we think everything in terms of objects, which is a more natural way of thinking. So for example, if I am modeling a, banking domain problem, so what happens? There is a customer. Now this customer goes to bank. So there is a bank. Then within the bank, he goes to teller. Then there is a teller. And then, this customer is interacting with teller to get the money.
Yeah.
So these are the transactions. So it's very natural if we can model the whole problem space in terms of concrete objects. So customer is an object, teller is an object, bank is an object, and then each object has, some properties. Like customer has a bank account number, teller has a employee ID number. So and they are doing certain function. So it's very natural to think in this manner.
Okay.
So same way when we are defining the concepts, it's very easy to identify it like an object. And then what are the different properties or attributes of those objects? So object plus attribute, this we make as a concept. So we call it as a concept. So for example, health condition code. So this health condition code, you can think like health condition is a class or a object class. And, then in that object class, you can have several properties. So health condition code can be one property, description can be another property, short name can be another property, and so on.
Okay.
So then if I say health condition is a class and code is a property, then health condition code is a concept, which is actually a combination of class plus property.
Fair enough.
So I take another example. Patient is a object class and name is a property. So patient name becomes a concept.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. So it's very easy to think like that. So so we can identify all the objects and we can identify all the properties of that object. So object class plus property is called concept. And the next thing we need to identify is if this concept can take any value or if this concept can take value from a finite set of list or code directory. So this concept plus value domain, this defines the whole conceptual domain, and which is actually a combination of all the data elements. So that is the job of MDDS.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions?
Property are the same thing.
Sorry?
Attribute and property will be the same thing?
Yeah, attribute and properties are synonyms. You can use an attribute word or you can use property word, same thing. So your voice is very low.
I'm saying it is important to mention that, in the implementation, MDDS, the people sort of didn't understand this aspect. They look at only data elements and, value sets and code directories. They don't really understand how all of this comes together. And that is the missing link as far as the implementation is concerned.
Absolutely. And one more thing I want to emphasize here, sir. Like when we are defining a health data dictionary, so we need to actually model the dictionary based on this concept. Like you should have a class, you should have attribute, you should have a combination of class and attribute which form the concept. Then you should have a relation between concept and the value domain. And then ultimately define all the data elements. And each concept will have a concept identifier. So if you see the SNOMAD today, SNOMAD is somewhat modeled, like that. So in SNOMAD, each SNOMAD is not a code. SNOMAD, each and everything has an identifier. So we generally can say that SNOMAD has all the concepts. And, each concept has an identifier. Then each concept can have several representations or synonyms. So this aspect is not shown in this diagram, but then it is also possible that same data element I can represent in a different manner, but ultimately the concept is same. So for example, medication order and drug order. So if you see, the concept is same, but these are different representations. So drug order also means, medication order. So whether I say drug order or whether I say medication order, it is only the way of representing it differently. So then each concept can have multiple representations. Then out of those representations, there will be certain preferred representations. There will be a full specified namespace, qualified value, which we call the FSM. So those things are there. So when we are kind of designing a SNOMAD-based database, we take care of all these aspects. So ultimately, this whole diagram what I'm showing here, I can exactly model it to populate all the SNOMADs.
Okay.
And if you see the objective of SNOMAD is to uniquely identify each term in an unambiguous manner. And that is the same objective of MDDS. It is the objective of MDDS is that if I'm defining some data element here, whether I'm saying it medication order and in another application Ved is saying it as a drug order, doesn't mean so long we are understanding it is the same concept and it has the same data type, length, representation, size, type, and everything. So metadata is same. So we will be able to interoperate.
Good to know.
Yeah. So as a team, this is the thing that we have to practice on. Krishan, what I will suggest is that, the value domain and the objects, concepts, now, the team should practice on that. Even beyond this training class, I think we should have to come up with a model where people have to practice it and understand it very well, because that internalization hasn't happened. And if it doesn't happen in this team also, then, the value is lost.
Then we are going to have a lot of problems rolling forward.
Yeah,
fully agreed, sir. And, I will be happy to internalize the team more on that, because as a Access team, we need to be, more knowledgeable on these aspects when we are presenting it to others.
Correct. Because when we go and, talk about data elements and, code directories only, then people don't really get the meaning of, the depth of the MDDS. So what they need to understand is it's not just data elements and code directories. It is, the concepts and the value domain putting together the conceptual domain, which is sort of the real thing.
Right, sir.
For me, it's the foundation of the whole thing. Right?
Yeah. So this particular table, is showing the various entities and, how many elements are under each entity. So this is more kind of a statistical grouping of the whole, work that has been done in MDDS. But one thing I want to emphasize, whatever we have done so far in MDDS is, I can say it like one version of it, but it's a ever evolving standard. So more and so each and every data organization. So when let us say, so one is in India, we need a data governance structure. Okay. So each and every kind of data owner organization, they have yet to come up with, identifying all the concepts, in their domain, and then what are the possible, value domains or the code directories associated with those concepts, and they will keep on publishing it. And we need a single place to publish all these definitions, which should not be just in the form of booklet. It can be either in the form of SQL, or it can be in the form of XML databases, or it can be in the form of APIs, or it can be in the form of triplet stores, RDF triplet stores. So I will cover those aspects as well. So only then we can, implement the MDDS thing. Right now, people are only reading it like a book, and then they forget it. And they only take a half meaning of that thing, that okay, as Dr. Pankaj said, that they only understand, ye to data element hi to hai, name, size, type mein define kar lunga. That's all. But this is only a half story of the whole thing. So
yeah, Krishan, actually, that is the crux of the matter. When the technology person looks at it, he doesn't understand the domain aspects of it. So the conceptual domain includes a lot of domain knowledge built into it. Now, when a domain person looks at it, a functional person looks at it, is not able to appreciate how the object classes are created. So as a result, unless the crossover people look at it, the entire thing doesn't become clear. So people have to really learn it.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So we need to educate the people. Actually, very few people, understand the ISO 11179. So I will recommend, all of us in the team should read about, 1179 first. That is a starting point. And then, we should, put our domain knowledge, domain perspective to the whole understanding of MDDS, and then present it to the respective people. And this will be very helpful to define the data ownership and the data governance model in the country. Because as I said, this concept definition cannot be done by a single organization. Each and every data owning organization has to take the responsibility of defining their own respective concepts and publish it. So we should have a way of publishing all these, concepts in a database.
So is this concept of a data governance structure clear to MIT yet?
So MIT has an understanding about the technological aspect of that. So
Not really
a little bit. Sorry, I'm digressing a little bit. So I would like to show you something. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
So this is the e-governance standard, gov.in, which is developed by MIT.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that it publishes all the notified standards like MDDS and all.
Mm.
So under the MDDS thing, what they have done is they are publishing the code directories and the XML schemas.
Okay.
So when we are saying we need to host the code directory, and there's a lot of debate happening whether we should use Solar or we should do database or so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. I would say why not we simply develop the XML schema and give it to MIT. They will publish on their portal. Now if I show you these code directories, so these are all code directories basically.
Mm.
So they have classified the code directories under common, under all domain, or any code directory specific to person identification, any code directory specific to land region. Similarly, one line item will come code directories related to health.
Yeah.
So now if I go to, for example, land region thing, or say person thing. So these are all the code directories. Now they are publishing these code directories in different formats. So they are publishing it as a open data standard format, ODS. They are publishing it as a CSV file. Now I can simply download it. So is some problem happening with the laptop. So I can download all these files. So it is also in the XML format. It is also in JSON format. And they are publishing all these code directories in one single place. Mm-hmm. So right now they are not carrying the database concept with it because we need a whole master data management thing here. So till the time that happens, they are publishing all the code directories like that. So we can simply develop this CSV file and give it to MIT. Mm-hmm. And then they can publish all the health related code directories in this portal. That's all. The same way, for the MDDS elements, what they are doing is, this is the XML schema for generic data element they have defined. So under each thing, these are all the MDDS elements for the generic domain. So as I said, generic domains are all the elements which are common across all the ministries. So I would not use the word ministry, I would say the domains, common across all the domains. So for example, date, so they are publishing the XST file for that. Yeah. So this is the XML schema. Yeah. This is what government requires.
Krishan, hold. Now, at this point, it is important to clarify to the team. Now, if Krishan and I look at this, we can read it. We don't require, software to read this. However, if it is a domain person, a functional person who doesn't understand the syntax, he or she cannot read this.
Yeah.
And if you bring a technology person who doesn't understand the domain, again that person cannot read this.
Yeah.
But for me and Krishan, it is so easy. We just look at it and we understand what this is. So
yes, sir. And that is why this mighty and the NEGP, they have entrusted the task of defining the MDDS to the respective domains. And they have not left it to the technical people only, because the domain expertise should come from the right set of people who have worked in the respective domains. So Health Ministry, fortunately, we had this committee which had this combination of technology and the domain knowledge. So we defined it, but we now need to carry forward the work to this level now. So I think this is something we need to work on. And I've already started defining the XML schemas, and I will give separate sessions to the analyst team on how to define these XML schemas for all the 1077 elements and all the 141 code directories. We need to define the schemas, JSON and the XML files, and we need to give it to MIT. That is our main deliverable. Now, whether they publish it in database or whether they publish it as a simple on the portal, it is a job they can decide.
And this is the crux of the matter, where Ministry of Health is not willing to pick it up because they are not able to figure out. They say this is gibberish.
But it's a phenomenal value. I mean, it's a major step towards having health systems or any systems be interoperable in the country.
Yeah, because when a health system engages a technical architect, that person will not have the wherewithal to be able to define this, but that person can read it.
Sure, they can read it and use it.
Yeah, exactly. So that is why they can read it, they can use it in their systems, but they will not have the wherewithal to define it.
No, so if the guide rails are available, you've already solved a lot of problems.
Correct.
Future problems.
Correct. That is the value of all this. So MDDS is not data elements and code directories. It is actually interoperable components defined as XSDs. Something that an example is put in front of you.
So why don't we put this on our monthly check-in list? This is what we need to get done.
So Arun, basically, so it will not be very difficult to get the buy-in on this, because Mighty, as you can see on the portal, they are already publishing it for different entities. What they have not yet done is, for health domain, there is still no elements published so far, and that is still in the booklet format. So that is the area, Access Health, as Access Health, we can work and we can publish all the MDDS elements and code directories in the format what they need, and then maybe you and Anita can go there and you can talk to them to publish all the elements through their portal initially. And later on, maybe they can publish it in another manner, like database format or whatever format.
Considering the work we have done, this is a space we should own. Considering the work that we have done in this space, we should be the natural choice and we should own this space with Mighty for healthcare.
Yes.
Completely agreed.
And that would be a huge contribution to solving the healthcare data thing in the country.
Completely agreed. But Arun, maybe separately I will run an exercise and I'll show it to you. I will ask Priyanka to read it, and I will ask Ved to read it, and the result will be in front of you.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
No, but sir, let me tell you, Priyanka only developed one of the XML schema with me in the past.
Okay. Okay. So we will ask one of the analysts to read it, and we will ask Ved to read it, and these whatever they read will be clearly visible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ultimately, if you now can see this table, now if you see this table in a different perspective. So all these data elements, if let us say analyst team is going to define the XML schemas, so all these data format and size matters there. So they need to define the size and the format when defining the schema for that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is a simple booklet, and everybody will read it like, okay, it's a table. That's all.
Sure. It's going to make
So
the
what-
life of a database designer so much easier. It's going to make the life of a database designer so much easier in healthcare.
And not only database designing part, even when we are doing the interoperability and we are defining the translator layers. So in the data mapper patterns, we have the XML based transformers available in almost all the ESBs. Almost all the
quality of data. Huge impact on quality of data.
So you can just apply these XML schemas in the XML transformers, and that's all. The mapping will be done.
Sure. Yeah, this should be high priority for us.
So I think rest of the thing, doesn't matter because our team is already working on this piece. So I will invite the team to ask any specific questions they want to understand. This part I will cover in the federated architecture lesson when I will come to that part. So any questions on the MDDS thing, Raghav, Akriti, anybody you have any questions?
Sir, I just have one request.
Yeah.
सर जैसे हम ये बात करते सर XML, API, JSON, so we don't have any knowledge about them. How do they work? What are they? So I think you should also teach us about them.
Yes, there's some basic idea about them because whenever the conversation goes into that domain, we are
So like you were talking about XML format or something, so we are not aware of them.
Yeah, so basically what I will request is this current exercise, what we are doing, we can add one more session on, or maybe 2 sessions on XML and JSON. Because anyway, this is a very important thing we need to teach you.
Yes, sir.
So
That is
I think Anita, you may add, one more class in the series of classes on the XML and the JSON.
Sure.
And about the APIs also, how they function, what will be their role and
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
You were mentioning SNOMED earlier. Can you just explain possible the difference between how MDDS looks at data elements and SNOMED? Layman language perspective.
So basically, SNOMED has more than 3 lakh terms with their respective identifiers. But if you see the intention of SNOMED and the MDDS, it is somewhat common. The intention of SNOMED is again to kind of, harmonize all the concepts that are used in the health domain. So whatever doctor is using in the health domain, like he's giving some findings, symptoms, or he's writing some notes, whatever, it should be expressed in an unambiguous manner. So how is it possible? That is only possible when I can map each term to an identifier, because identifiers are something which can be interpreted by machines in an unambiguous manner. So as a human being, I gave a very example I already gave you. So if let us say in one note, one doctor wrote like drug order should be something. And then in another note, another doctor wrote medication order should be something. So long drug order and medication orders are linked to the same identifier, so machine will understand that this is the same term.
Sure.
As a human being, we may or may not.
Sure. So I'm trying to understand. So if they do the same thing, taking a step back, why do we recommend MDDS versus SNOMED?
Okay, so basically, SNOMED is all the clinical terms. So it's all kind of, I would say, these are all the clinical terms which are used by doctor, like any specific, diagnosis given or any specific finding, any specific symptom, diagnose, those things. But if you see MDDS, the meaning is more at the information model level. So as you saw, there is an object class, there is a property, and you are defining the data elements out of that. And the same set of combination of data elements we say as data sets, and whatever we need in the interoperability are actually the data sets, which are the group of data elements. So even if you see our E objects, these are all the group of data elements. It's a data set basically. So MDDS perspective is more to define the information model layer, and that facilitate the semantic interoperability part. SNOMED is more on the harmonizing the clinical terms and the terminologies. So if doctor is writing something fever with something, or maybe some other doctor is writing something, they could have the same common clinical interpretation of that term. This is the meaning of snowman. So both have a different, both have a common purpose, but at a different tangent. MDDS is more for designers, implementers, and the person who are involved in implementing the interoperability pieces. And SNOMED is more for doctors and the medical domain related people, and who are kind of interpreting the clinical findings, terms, terminologies, and those things.
Thank you.
Sir, I also have a question. So, like in the value sets, all the values that are given, and if somebody wants to add some extra value, so can they do that?
Yeah. So Raghav, as I said, we need to define a data governance model in the country. So data has to be owned by a specific entity, which will be termed as a data owning organization. And that data owning organization will be responsible for adding, altering, changing the values in the domain. And there has to be a process, of publishing the changes. For example, something has been added in the domain, then there should be a broad stakeholder consultation to get the approval from the experts from different parties who are going to use that. And based on the consensus building, that will be notified. So there is a process behind it. So if I say in a technical manner, everything is like I will give an update API, anybody can update it. That's all. But it is not that simple. There is a process for updation and upgradation. There is a process of data ownership and governance behind it. So only after following the proper process, changes can be done.
Yeah, but then what is the need for the governance that we have to explain? So the need for the governance is that suppose you just add a data element, add a value in one system and the other systems don't have it, then the interoperability is lost.
So that is what I wanted to ask.
So then if that is the case, then once the change has been done, all these changes have to be published, in a single place. And this we call as a single source of truth. This is the first design principle in the NDHB. So when we say single source of truth, it means I can get the golden record, one single common meaning of that, from somewhere. So even if changes are done by the respective organizations, there should be a place where I can get that common value. And as you can say right now, e-governance, this portal, they are publishing all the code directories, for example. If more values are added in the code directories and the updated CSV files are upgraded on their portal, I can go and download it from there. This is a starting point. Later on, there can be a master data management solution can be built where it will be database hosted on a database, and then there will be some notification mechanism evolved so that different parties can come to know whenever there are changes in the code directories, they can be notified and they can go and download the delta part of that. So that is a future. But right now, the simplest thing is I need to have one place where I can go and I can get all the masters. Right now, it is not there. So that common place for the time being to start with is the e-governance portal in my mind.
Yeah. So if you go back to the first class where I talked about, very strong digital health governance and, the financial lever working together, that is where, the digital health governance role comes in. They are the ones who have to own the, values, value sets, code directories, all the data elements, all the conceptual domains, objects. So they are the ones who have the buck stops there. So they are the guys who will come and say, okay, unless you go through the process, the new value not allowed. Now in this country, we don't have it. In this country, we just don't have it.
We don't realize the importance of it yet.
Okay, sir.
However, we don't have it in health, but there are two other examples where we have something similar. One is the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority, IRDA, Although they're not doing it electronically, they're doing it on paper, but they're doing exactly the same thing. And the other one is telecom regulatory TRI. So they are doing it electronically. So one telecom operator cannot have their own value sets.
Okay.
One telecom operator cannot go and define their own, data elements. So the metadata is completely governed and, to the last dot by TRI.
Okay.
So a great thing would be for us to maybe write a case study on TRI's, thing, and then say that this is the benefit, right? This is what you need to do.
But the reason why TRI came up and is so successful is because all of that is under Ministry of IT. They didn't have to go outside the ministry.
Yeah. Which is the funny thing, right? That the Ministry of IT understands it in one place, doesn't understand it in another.
Well, Ministry of IT does, but the problem in this one is it is cross-ministerial.
Yeah.
So in telecom, that was not the issue.
So could we offer to IRDA to, give them a set of give them an electronic version of this value set?
Yeah. So outside the purview of this class, we should sit down and talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a strategic thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Krishan, go on, please.
So some of the code directories, as you can see on the screen, we identified the ownership and the sources also. But this need to be a little bit changed now. For example, the lawing code, there is an international organization, which is publishing the lawing. But in India, NRCS is responsible for publishing all the terminologies. So we can count NRCS to be the owner of all the terminology related stuff here. ICD 10, 11, or lawing or whatever, snowman. Same way, IRDA should be given the responsibility of defining all the private sector pair or public or private sector pair related code directories, third party administrators, or all the pair related stuff. Now when we are working for IT Standard Committee, one of the tasks is to define all the standard response codes. But today, let us say if we work on the response codes, we will give it to NHA, and NHA will be promulgating it. They will be kind of issuing it further. But NHA, is it have the mandate on all the private sector? IRDA is governing all the private sector. NHA is doing all the PMJ related stuff. So some of them have to do it, take the responsibility of distributing all those code directories, or maybe as a joint ownership they can do that. But there has to be one organization which is kind of publishing all the standard codes, all the response codes, all the value sets related to pair objects. And same way for all the provider objects, again we need the value sets. So someone has to take the authority of hosting it, publishing it, responsible for upgrading or updating it, and kind of making a single source of truth version of that. So as a governance, we need to identify those points, and we need to talk to them, and we need to interact with these.
Yeah, absolutely. So another example I can put on the table is the latest one, NPCI, National Payment Corporation of India. Again, that's a regulatory body that is doing everything electronically, and they own the data elements, code directories, all of the metadata to the last dot. Otherwise, the ease with which you are able to transfer your money from one bank account to the other, peer to peer, and the way Paytm works, the way Google Pay works, that will just not be possible.
True.
So we have examples of these existing in our country, just that, and this is cross ministries. This is between finance and IT.
Yeah, so it's a great example. Calls for a paper to be written.
Well, all of that is written. So, Krishnan, if you go to slide number 29, sorry, I'm hijacking your presentation a little bit.
No problem. That one?
Yeah, if you can explain this, people will understand how the mobile works from tower, mobile to mobile to a tower.
Yeah.
How the evolution has happened.
Yeah. So on the left-hand side, this is one example we took from the current telecom industry. So in the old days, long old days, we used to have the hotline kind of model. And whenever, I need to make a call to someone in Bangalore, I will first write to operator and, there was a hotline mechanism. So only the people with the facility, they could make the direct calls. But, the problem in this is, this was more point to point. So even, today, all the diplomats, and all the presidents and, prime ministers, heads of the nations, they have the hotline mechanism. They can directly make a hotline call to the, other heads of the country, other countries. So that is a point-to-point example, point-to-point integration. Then it evolved to the trunk dialing mechanism. Trunk dialing mechanism, there was a intermediary person involved in that, which you call the operator. So whenever I wanted to make a call to Bangalore, I will first make a call to operator and I will put my request to him. That okay, I want to make a call to this number in Bangalore, and she will put me on hold for some time, and then she will have to connect me with that number in Bangalore. So this was all manual process. So the challenge in the two was, either it was the first was the point to point, which is hotline thing. So I can connect only to the other address directly, which is currently happening in the interoperability space today. So I want to integrate with, application A and application B. Both have to know each other, well in ahead. Their team will work together. They will make a common understanding of their master tables, data formats, APIs, everything. They will publish a document and they will do some development. And then they will integrate with each other using web services or, whatever way. The second example is a broker-based example, which is a kind of non-intelligent broker. It has it has a sort of ESB or something. I can define some kind of routing rules there. That okay, this application will talk to this application. So the routing is defined in a kind of fixed manner. And the third one is the current scenario. So today what happens is now there is no need of trunk dialing. All the mobiles have the facility of doing the STD calls and IST calls also. So I want to make a call to my friend in Bangalore. No problem. I will just connect the number. The call will go there. How it happened? It happened with the kind of the current the telecom exchange model. And current telecom exchange model, they have a registry of all the subscriber numbers.
Yeah.
And based on the registry and the service discovery, they identify the sources basically, who is the caller and who is the callee. And they make a dynamic routing between the caller and callee based on the exchange mechanism. So this is more intelligent broker.
Yeah.
So this is exactly the same thing we need in the health space now. So current thing is still the hotline model. It's a point to point. Then some of the advanced companies like Dell, they have built some middleware sort of thing, which I would say is like a broker model. But we don't need even a broker model here, because still in broker you need to do a lot of work. We need an intelligent routing, and this is the exact exchange thing which we are talking now. And this is a health information exchange. I will cover more in detail. Now, in order to have this health information exchange, we need a lot of things here. So one is we need the common masters. We need the common API structures. We need the common code formats. We need the intelligent routing mechanisms. We need the intelligent service discovery mechanisms. So all sort of that thing is required. And that is why here comes the EHR, PHR, everything that we are talking. It plays the role. And the basic fundamental thing is to correct the data, first of all.
Very good.
That's why MDDS is the role here.
Yeah, so Krishnan, you can go back to your flow. Sorry for hijacking and bringing this up.
I think I'm done with this MDDS thing. If team doesn't have any questions, so I will go to NDHB thing now. Should I or Raghav, you have any questions here?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So basically, again, we have talked many times on NDHB in different perspectives, different ways. So I will like to make it more interactive session rather than I keep on talking, because now almost all of us knows NDHB. Even the analyst, we covered this topic in their college when we had the session. So please make it more interactive rather than I keep talking. So this is the current thing, what I was talking. This is the current scenario. And the best example is what's happening now. Due to this COVID thing, almost the equations are changed, very drastically now. So today, the current stage is all the applications are in silos. They don't talk to each other, or they talk in different manner. Each application has been built with a different thought process, different architecture, without a common understanding of what they want to develop and how. And definitely the concepts or data element level, as we have discussed, there is no matching. And identifiers are all local. So if something is used as a patient registration number in one application, it has no meaning in the other application. Now, the problem of this model is there is no ability to derive data-backed resource planning or health outcome analysis. And this is happening in the case of COVID. Today we are getting a tracker, COVID tracker. It is showing some count. But can some of you tell me where this number is coming from? Now, if you would say that it is coming from IDSP, then there are cases one case was reported from Dharavi slum yesterday. So can we say that IDSP has a penetration to that level now that they can reach out to almost all the citizens of the country who are suffering from COVID? Or
so IDSP has integrated at a very minor district level. वो पहले IDSP वो update नहीं हुआ था, but now it has been. It is working with multiple sectors now. अभी IDSP and all the states also have, I guess, have started reporting to IDSP.
So my question now is, if let us say somebody has a symptom of cold and fever, and if he goes to a local practitioner, GP, is there any notification by the government that GP has to submit the symptoms related data to IDSP today? Is that notification anywhere?
No, it's not there.
I don't think so.
So that means almost lot of people would be there who are coming with the symptoms similar to COVID, but they will never be reported in the IDSP. So the actual numbers which are shown in the tracker, the actual number can be way beyond that.
You're absolutely right. And it is a clinical judgment of the clinician to decide whether to report or not. And, a lot of time people don't go to a clinician. When people go to a clinician, it is for the clinician to decide whether, really this is something that is reportable or not. And clinical judgment can vary.
Sure.
Yeah. So exactly this is the point. So I would say at the onset, I would like to say one thing, that when some committee drafted the NDHB report, there were still a lot of questions which are open in that, which could not be answered, when public consultation was done. And that is the reason, why the implementation is still far away. And one of the reasons, the example I can give is NDHB and government specifically focus on non-communicable disease aspect, NCD. Yeah. But today, what is the scenario? COVID is not a non-communicable disease. And it has almost changed the equations in all the ministries. Today, even defense has less importance than health. वो जिंदा ही नहीं बचेंगे तो आगे क्या करेंगे? So that is the kind of the gaps in the thought process of the committee who developed the report, and they are not able to answer. Okay, they said there should be NCD disease registries, But where will be infectious disease registries? Where will be epidemic disease registries, which is of more importance? So it's not there. And these are the lacunas in the existing NDHB, why it is not being adopted. So today we are all talking about COVID disease registry. Nobody is talking about NCD disease registry now. And if IDSP is going to collect all the data, so my question, my very basic question is, one, there should be a notification by the Ministry of Health that IDSP will be the receiver of all the COVID-related data. Number one.
That's what's there, Kishan. And IDSP has penetration, like Akriti was saying, even below district level since years. It's not the first time. This is what they do. So those notifications are there by the Ministry of Health.
No, this has to be strictly enforced basically. Then, any doctor who is not reporting the case related to COVID to IDSP, he should be penalized.
Hey, it is not the doctors who are not reporting. It is actually the concealed patients for that active. I mean, it needs. Never mind.
Sorry, Akriti, can you repeat that?
It is not the general practitioners. General practitioners के लिए भी the advisories are out now that everybody has to report any case of COVID that comes into, and they have to report it to the district facility which has been enlisted by the government.
And there is a specific format also.
Yes. As Anaida ma'am is saying, there is a format. There's a performer and certain annexures which they have to actually. And the sub-district goes to the district goes to the state, because all of these had initially been settled at state, but now they have been settled in district and sub-district levels as well. So
having the notifications is only one part.
Yeah, actually, no, I don't know.
So in my opinion, having the notifications is only one part, because what you do when you issue a notification is you're just shifting the burden of compliance to someone. But you're not making it convenient for him to do that. So it's the convenience that is going to make it work rather than the notification, because the notification is only putting the onus on somebody, that's all.
So is there any regulatory compliance of the notification?
Which is where digital health has to come in, where we make it easy for a clinician when they're in private. Yeah.
No, but also there's a fundamental question. There's also a fundamental question. But clinician, report karega to, the notification says that COVID has to be reported. How does the clinician know it is COVID? Almost all influenzas seem similar as far as signs and symptoms are concerned.
So that's where digital comes in, right? You report everything similar to COVID to a certain app, and there have to be filters which decide which one is going for testing, so that you can confirm at a subsequent stage whether it is COVID or not.
Yeah, all this is happening.
Which is where the self-assessment app and stuff can be so useful.
So I have one question, Arun. So can we say...
I visit to the clinician, I'll say hardly any cases would get confirmed to be COVID. I mean, they would just be cold or flu or whatever. Yeah.
No, so I have a question now. So basically, if we all are agreeing that IDSP is getting the data related to COVID, can we say safely that IDSP is going to be the disease registry for COVID? Number one. Number two, NDHB clearly says that focus should be on wellness. Then wellness, I mean that, okay, the initial symptoms related to cold and cough and fever and all should be collected, and there should be some projection done on that data even before that convert into COVID. Is that happening anywhere? Or is there any plan of government to do that?
It's beginning to happen. Firstly, I think COVID is an very extreme example for us to take right now, especially with regard to what we're talking about. While a lot of these things apply, it's a very evolving situation. Secondly, data being collected is being used by the local war rooms, by the national war rooms for actually doing epidemiological trend analysis, etc. to the best of their abilities. I'm not saying it's actually happening bang on, but that's the whole idea. I feel like there's a lot of different information on COVID which each of us has. Maybe we can use a different example right now.
But Anaita, one thing you need to agree that COVID has exposed us to the core. It is a sudden surprise test.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying we all have different perspectives of what's being done currently. So that's why I'm saying maybe that's not a useful example to use for our class right now. I'm not saying I disagree.
No, I'm saying that example we are not yet ready at all. And this, if we say that digital health, the importance of digital health lies here. See, after this COVID thing will be solved, I think what will be the most important thing in the mind of the people will be the health and safety rather than anything else. Forget about e-commerce, forget about Amazon and this thing and that thing. If you will be alive only, that you will enjoy the pleasure of rest of the things. No. Today, everyone is scared of life. So first thing, I think the right way of projecting the NDHP is to talk about all these things now, where we are. And COVID can happen, anything can happen anytime. Even COVID can come back in December or something. People are projecting that it can recur again. So what is our preparedness? Nothing. So that should be the starting point, basically, of the digital health in the country. How to keep the country prepared for such kind of situations. It can happen anytime. So
I don't think I agree. I'm just saying for better understanding. I don't think anybody disagrees, Krishan. I'm saying for better understanding because we all have different levels of information on this. Of course, everything written here is applicable to that. Everything written here should have been done so that we would have been better prepared. From an illustration.
So one of the fundamental things which is coming out is today we do not have a single source and we do not have a trust in the numbers which government is publishing. We cannot say with utmost confidence that okay, whatever cases are reported are the actual cases. And the reason is because there are the siloed systems. There is no single source of truth existing anywhere. And this is not only for COVID, this is for any disease, I would say, because there is no disease registry. Indian Cancer Society maintains some cancer registry related thing, but then again, there are many cancer registries. There is no national level disease registries or state level disease registries existing. So that is one thing.
Yeah, just to add to that, Krishan, also since you mentioned COVID, so when the COVID patients are put into the hospitals, confirmed cases, then all the treatment that they undergo, so all that data is not coming back for epidemiological analysis because every hospital is storing the data in a different format.
Absolutely.
Now, so there are a lot of comorbidities. Which are the risk factors. Now, all of that need to be screened and cleaned and all that. It's just practically impossible that you get the data from all these different places and in a clean, analyzable format.
Yeah, that is the crux of the problem, sir. And that is this slide is showing exactly the same thing. Why this is happening is because all the systems are siloed. Even if hospitals are implementing their health information systems and whatever things, and they have done it in whatever beautiful technology, the real thing is there is no common meaning of data, there is no interoperability, there is no common record format, there is no way of exchanging the data from one to another, and more than that, there is no regulation which is kind of forcing the people to exchange the data. So even the NDHB does not talk about regulations, and this is one of the weakness of the NDHB report. Unless there are regulations, why people will bother? This is just another report. So I am happy with whatever I am doing. Why I will like to share my data with anybody? Or why I will like to follow the FIRE thing? Or even the MDDS thing? Unless there is a regulation passed by the parliament and clearly stated that you will not do the practice unless you follow XYZ things. Then everybody will do that. So this is the exact thing which is happening, and that is the current landscape. So I need not to talk more about the current landscape. This is the exact thing which is going on. So the so there are a lot of words here. So Raghav, I have a question from you and Aditi and all. There is a NDHB, there is a NDHM, and there is a NDHE. What do you understand by these different terms?
The NDHM is the National Digital Health Mission. NDHB is the blueprint. And what was the last term, sir, you said?
NDHE.
NDHE. Enterprise? Not sure.
That is the ecosystem.
Ecosystem. Okay.
So the objective is the blueprint define the roadmap to develop the ecosystem, and the mission will be responsible for overseeing the implementation of that ecosystem. So all these are interconnected, aspects of that. So this is the preface of the NDHM, and if you read it carefully, a lot of things come out of it. So one is to elevate the existing systems from providing disparate electronic services to integrated digital services. So can someone tell me, like in the team, what is the difference between electronic service and the digital service? So electronic services, all we are looking at today. So we have different systems. Most of the systems are they falls in the 3-tier application thing. Still, there are few systems which are in client server technology, and they have the applications which are accessed through internet web browser, and it's they have done some application development. So this is all the electronic services they are built on. But digital services, can you tell me like what is digital service? We all are working in digital health team. So can someone tell me what is digital service? Raghav?
So I think we should give other people all the chance.
Okay, so basically there can be different connotations of this term, but a very simple term I would say is any delivery of data and content in multiple delivery formats. I would say it a digital service. So when I say the data and content delivery in different formats, it can be either the normal whatever way of thinking is web browsers, it can be mobiles, it can be IoT sensors, it can be point of contact devices, or it can be anything from where data can be generated. But I need to have a kind of data and content delivery. I should have an integrated platform to deliver the data, to analyze the data, and to get the common meaningful insights of that data. So that is the digital platform. So when this thing comes in, then a lot of emerging technologies come in the role. So when I say like IoT, so IoT thing comes in, then a lot of data thing we are talking about, then all this artificial intelligence and machine learning thing also comes in. Then, blockchain thing also comes in. So these are the emerging digital technologies. And then mobile phones, smartphones, all these things become the preferred choices of delivering the applications and data. Not only the mobile browser, so browsers and all. So current applications, everything is confined in the domain of a hospital. So they have a server in the hospital IT room, and they have some application which is accessed by the doctors on the browsers. And sir, you can remind me, we can still remember the problems we were facing in Max Healthcare when we were doing the Wi-Fi implementation thing and all. So
yeah, absolutely.
There was a computer on table or something we introduced, right, sir?
Computer on wheels, cows.
Computer on wheels. So computer on wheels. So we had a lot of the design thinking in that how this thing will be structured. But then we had other challenges. Wi-Fi thing. They had the corridors, and corridors were kind of very haphazard way. So a lot of blockings were there and all these things. So it was difficult to access the application continuously. From one place to another. So if doctor is moving from one bed to another or one room to another, there was a problem. So we need that technology. So how can we solve this? We can solve it if we have a mobile app built for the doctor who is on the walk basically across the floors. So he can continue accessing his patients even while he's walking from one patient to other. He can just open the patient in his mobile app. He can do whatever he want to do, and then he can move to other patient. So that everything comes in the digital space. So one of the focus of the NDHM is very clear to shift from the disparate electronic services to integrated digital services. The other aspect I want to talk about is the creation of district level electronic databases, establishing registries for all diseases of public importance, and most significantly, establishing federated national health information architecture. So they talk about electronic databases. they talk about registries for all diseases, and they talk about a national health information architecture, which is federated in nature. So these are the key principles which are coming out of NDHM. And then they are saying that all this state level and public and private health providers at the state and national levels should be kind of integrated with this model, and that data should be consistent with MDDS and electronic health record standards. So this preface enough give us enough material to discuss what is the scope of NDHB, NDHM, and all these things. So primarily, if you see it all started from India document basically. So India architecture, I want to say a word here. In 2018, one of the work MIT did was to define the enterprise architecture for the country. And in a nutshell, I can say this was a architecture for connected government. So when connected government, it means is we have different government of India ministries, and they have their own different applications, different data modeling, all this thing. They wanted to make a connected governance model. So interoperability was a key piece in the technology side with a shared infrastructure, and there was a need to develop the common portal application so that citizen could access the services through a common portal. So Umang was one portal which was designed and developed for the same thing. And through the Umang portal, we could access multiple government services, citizen services basically. And then open standards were notified for defining all these applications. So that was a piece. And for the same aspect, MDDS came the origin. So when they thought that, okay, different ministries need to be integrated, they thought that, there should be a common meaning of data across the different ministries. So each ministry was representing a particular domain. So there was a need to kind of define the common meaning of data across the domains, conceptual domains that, I was talking. And that is why the 16 ministries were given the responsibility to develop the MDDS of their respective domains. So interoperability was the key piece. And then, there was a requirement of a unified and uniform interfaces, more citizen and business centric services, and security and privacy, those kind of things. So this was a G2C model where government thought of, delivering all the services to the end customers directly. But the same model, they thought could be evolved to the, B2C, B2B, and other models. So earlier, so for the same concept, this NDHM has now come, NDHB has now come. Any questions here? I think I'm boring now.
No, you're not boring. Actually, it's deep concepts. So people really need to understand all these things.
Yeah. So all I'm trying to say is the concept is not new to anyone. Even across the ministries, everyone knows this because India architecture is not only for health. This NDHB is a funneled version of this India architecture specific to health ministry. But the common principles have been borrowed from India vision only. This is the point that I'm trying to highlight.
Okay.
So as you can see, this whole enterprise architecture. So one of the thing is, whenever we have to solve a problem, we have to have an enterprise vision in mind rather than a particular aspect. So what I'm trying to put here is there are different perspectives in which we view a problem. So functional people, they will see the problem in the application domain model perspective. So what are the application requirements, functional requirements? Then technical person will think in terms of data, what the data modeling is required, what the technologies are required, or maybe the integration things are required. Nobody looks at the business reference model. What is the governance requirement? What is the key user requirement? That we all forget. So ultimately, that is the origin of siloed systems today. They start with something and they end up with something else. And it ultimately results into a siloed system, one more siloed system. Because there is no common architecture, there is no common vision, there is no common understanding. what they are building, why they are building, which technology they are using, why they are using. One particular developer is happy to do something in one technology, so he will keep saying that this technology is required. He will never understand why this technology is required, what it will solve. So those kind of challenges gave rise to the current spectrum of siloed applications. And we have to kind of solve this out. So what India architecture did, it defined the reference models, different reference models, and it defined the basic principles which need to be followed when we are designing a IT, a digital kind of system. So they defined a business reference models in which how the stakeholders could be identified, how the governance layers could be defined, how the requirements could be identified. Then they defined the application reference model for the business requirements of the application. Then data and technology will take care of common meaning of data should be there. Common set of technologies, technology principles should be followed. So I'm not saying common technology need to be followed. Technology can be anything. Fine. You're using NoSQL or using SQL is fine. So long you are following the technology principle, common technology principle. Then you need to follow the integration reference model, interoperability. You cannot build a system which acts in a standalone manner. It has to talk to the rest of the world. Security is a very important aspect in that. Performance is a very important aspect of that. And more than that, architectural governance is required, which is completely missing. So if I say you today that even the biometric devices, STQC does a certification before allowing the vendor to sell it in the country, which is doing nothing. It is capturing the biometric. And they are the pretty standard, well-defined algorithms to do that. Now, health related applications which are so important, which is vital to the sustenance of life, there is no certification authority which certify the product before allowing the vendor to sell it in the market. So anybody can develop anything out. So first certification in terms of functionality, certification in terms of architecture principles are required. And that was the objective of setting up the NDHM. That should be the objective, I say. So design principle I will talk about tomorrow. I have a separate session on design principle. The scope of NDHM we all know, and I think Arun can highlight it much better. We have two sides of the things. One is the governance side, the other is the governed side. And governance side, we have all the entities which we need to manage in terms of defining the governance model. All the ministries, regulators, or acts and laws. So one thing which I was saying earlier and highlighting here is NDHB clearly misses out in terms of what are the necessary acts and laws required to implement what they are recommending. And that is one of the weakness of the NDHB report. So unless there is a data protection bill pending in the parliament, but nobody is bought. Now we are talking about data security, privacy and everything. But we still not know what is the outcome of that data protection bill going to be. But whatever technical solution related to data privacy security we will build has to be in congruence with the data protection bill. So, and then, there are a lot of other data related bills. Maybe Dr. Pankaj, you can help me to elaborate that. So there is a mental health related bill. There is on the devices side, there is a separate regulation. So all these different data, there are a number of acts related to that. Each talk about certain aspect of the security. So when we are defining a national level data security privacy model, that has to be in congruence with all the acts and provisions that are in place. So NDHB is clearly missing in that. I think NDHB was developed by a committee of technical people. They completely forgot that piece. So governed side is rest of the people, So one of the major thing they forgot in the NDHB was the payer industry, provider-payer relationship, which is a very important piece. And again, I will take the reference of COVID. Now suddenly, everyone has come in the need of medical attention and need. And government is asking, you pay 4,500 to get the, the 6 screening test. But how many in our population can afford to pay the 4,500? How many of them are under the coverage by some insurance? Only very poor families can be under, PMJ, but, rest of the population is not. So those are the challenges which are coming out. So I think there should be, somewhere a clearly defined relationship between the provider and the payer, which is completely missing in the NDHB. A financial lever is a very, very important aspect in the overall scenario, which they overlooked. Then information technology providers, public health, private health. So these are the different standard things. So I will highlight it more in the. So before I jump into this layer, I will move to one diagram. So basically, NDHB talks about a 5-layer, architecture for the country, which define the building blocks. And this is the diagram basically. I think one more. So level 1, I would say it like that. Level 1 is the infrastructure, all the horizontal layers. They start with the infrastructure thing. Then data hub, then technology building blocks, application building blocks, and finally the access and delivery. And then you have the 2 vertical sides. One is the national standards, and the other is a unified health communication center. So the first is the infrastructure thing. Now, if you read this NDHB thing here, so they are clearly saying that the government community. So they are recommending government community cloud infrastructure as defined by MIT should be adopted for hosting of data building blocks in level 1 and level 2. Now, what is the interpretation of that? So one interpretation can be that all the data and all the infrastructure will be done by MIT. But then, we have a lot of private sector applications as well, and we have a lot of private clouds which are hosting their respective applications and data. Then we are talking about the PHR thing. Then PHR will be hosted by a lot of private vendors. So somewhere, I think they missed out that piece. Now, if you read the NDHB, what they are saying is level 1 and level 2 has to be handled by government, and the hybrid cloud environment is recommended for other levels and layers. So other levels are the technology layers, application layers, and access delivery layers. So that is a completely missing thing. And why I'm highlighting this NDHB in a different perspective here is because of these lacunas, NDHB is not getting rolled out. So as a access health, maybe we can sort out these challenges and we can work with ministry to define it in the right manner. So government community cloud cannot be the only source for hosting each and everything related to public and private data. In fact, there should be a hybrid, cloud model where both the public and private cloud should be allowed to host the data, but there should be enough data privacy, data residency related things should be defined in our protection bill, what is pending in the parliament. That is fine. But, both space should be allowed to coexist. And same with the data hub. So if we read by this report, then level 2, which is actually the data hub layer, which consists of unique health identifier, electronic health records, or health master directories. This everything has to be hosted by government. You mean MIT. They have clearly said MIT. So MIT is going to be hosting all these things. So MIT is going to host the unique health identifiers, so all the registries. MIT is going to host all the directories, what we are talking about, and then all the electronic health record related repositories, the federated architecture piece. And they are going to host us health clouds or the secure health networks, and they are going to set up a security and privacy operation control. And the rest of the components they are saying can be in the hybrid cloud. Any observation, any question? MIT has to do it, then why are we pushing MHFW for terms of registries? Yeah, so those are the open questions. So, sir, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to project the report in a different perspective, because we have been talking about NDHB so long, but I think we should read each and every word of it carefully to see a different interpretation of that. Maybe is it their intention? Because they are clearly said here, the government community cloud infrastructure as defined by MIT should be adopted for hosting of building blocks in level 1 and level 2. So is that a right intention or is that a mistaken fact? We should be discussing with the authorities. And if MIT is going to do that, then you're right. We need not to talk to MHW then. Arun, you have any observation? So on the data hub side, they are talking about these different registries: person, care provider, care professional, payer, governing bodies, research bodies, and pharmaceuticals. One of the words comes common here, and another point I want to highlight to the team here is there is a constant use of the word like directory or the registry. Somewhere they call facilities directory, as you can see on the page. Somewhere they call it health registries, part of the health registries. So can someone in the team tell me like what is the difference between registry and directory? So I gave you one example. So, and this is a practical example I gave. Today, if we are owning any land in the country, we are going to the sub-registrar office and getting our land registered, the title registered in our name.
Right.
So once the title is registered in our name, it is a mandatory provision. Only then I can claim to be the owner of that land. Yeah. So now another example is if I have to sell the same land to another person, then again we have to go to the registrar office and register our transaction. That this title has been transferred from A to B. Unless that is done, even if I take the money from the buyer and I don't get it registered in the registrar office, that transaction will be invalid in the eyes of law. I can still claim my title on the same land. So what I'm trying to say is there is a registrar office which is registering all the transactions related to land today. And this is a compulsory registration which kind of legitimizes that transaction. Now this is one aspect. Now another aspect, I give you the example of telephone directory. So there is a word used called directory. So there is a MTNL in Delhi, there was a MTNL directory. Now we are not using MTNL for long. There was a MTNL telephone directory. It contained the phone numbers of all the MTNL subscribers only. It was not sacrosanct Bible of all the mobile person or whoever is carrying the phones of the different, BSNL or anybody else. It was not carrying the complete listing. So it was not mandatory for anyone to be a part in the MTNL directory. Only when he was having an MTNL phone, he was having it. So this is the definition of directory. So now if same thing we extend to the meaning of registry and directory, so technically everything is a database. Even registry is a normalized, collection of databases. Even directory is a database. So the only thing which differentiates the two is if something is a registry, it has to be notified by government and there has to be an entry in the registry. Like the registrar office example I gave. So for example, Aadhaar. Now Supreme Court has kind of, liquidated the concept of Aadhaar, diluted it. But Aadhaar is a source of authentication basically. So now Several schemes, government has said it, like you need to have a Aadhaar based authentication if you want to use it, like DBT for example. So in order to have DBT, I need to have my Aadhaar. In order to have my PAN card related transactions, I need to link it with Aadhaar. So those are all notified by government and I need to have a Aadhaar. Similarly, if there is a care provider registry, now today there is a MCI and there is a Delhi Bar Medical Council, there is a different Karnataka Medical Council. They are registering their doctors in their respective databases. If government make a provision that all the care practitioners have to be registered before they are allowed to practice, then it become a registry.
Yeah.
But then challenges come is that it will close the shop of all the quacks and all the others. Or if government will allow everyone to register, then everyone will become a RMP, registered medical practitioner, even a Bengali Babu, a Bengali clinic. So what I'm trying to say is registry is something which is mandated by a government notification that in order to use certain transactions, to legitimize those, you need to have a mandatory registration in this database. That is called registry. And from that perspective, facility registry is one. So all facilities, if they are operational in the country, they need to be registered in one facility registry. Similarly, all care providers need to be registered in the facility registry. Same thing comes in the COVID registry. So if today we say that, all the hospitals have to mandatorily record the cases of COVID and one government notification along with the regulation comes, then it becomes a registry. Otherwise, it's a database. Then what will happen? Fortis will be sending the data, but maybe Max will not be sending the data. So we should see the difference between directory and registry in that perspective. But the unfortunate thing is NDHB is talking the exchange of these two things. I mean, somewhere they are using doctors directory, somewhere they are using facilities directory, somewhere they are using facility registry. And the piece of thing missing is there are 3 initiatives going on, which Dr. Pankaj always says. One is the NHRR related thing. The other is NIN thing. Then there is a Rohini thing. Then some other thing will also come in. How many facility registries are required? It has to be a single source of record. I can have multiple locations of databases, but I need one single place where I can authentically say that I am registered here. And this is my unique identifier. That is missing. So in order to handle this thing, I think for all the registries, we need to identify the authorities and we should be discussing in terms of what will be the necessary regulations, notifications. We have defined the MVP structure of all the registries. We have defined and we are defining the interaction APIs, how to interact with these registries. But someone has to take the ownership of, managing and maintaining that registry and making it mandatory for others to register in that. Only then it will become a registry. Now, technology building block, they are talking about several components like anonymizer. So can anyone tell me, Raghav, can you tell me what is anonymizer?
Sir, I don't know, sir, but I have a question. Yeah. Sir, till the time we do not have any registries, sir, so how will all of it will function? All the data exchange or everything. How will it function till the time we do not have any registry?
So now if you read the National Health Stack document, so they are bringing the concept of federated ID. So what they mean is, unless you have, so because we don't have the registries, we don't have a patient registry, we don't have a EMPI, Enterprise Master Person Index. I will talk more about it, later in federated architecture class. So how can I ensure that, all patients will have a global patient identifier? And unless that happens, now same thing I'm talking about PHR now. So I can have multiple instances of PHR. This is what, NDHB talking about. So I am the same patient. I can have multiple copies of my PHR repositories. So what will happen? Half of my records are here, half of my records are there. How will I collate that all these records belong to me? Unless I have a global identifier. Now you have a right question. Now, unless we have registries, how will we solve this problem? So NHS says, National Health Stack document, that you should have the concept of federated ID in the country. So by the word federated ID, it means that instead of having one unique global ID, you can have multiple IDs, but all those multiple IDs, some index should exist somewhere. And for example, I have a voter card, I have a driving card, a license, and I have a Aadhaar number. So it is mandatory for the hospital to get any of the government ID along with, whatever else. And they are generating one identifier. So let us say Fortis generate a patient registration number for me, but they have captured my driving license number with it. So my ID is tagged with the driving license number, which belongs to me only. So similarly, some other hospital I go and I get registered there, it has a local identifier there. But then, they ask my PAN number. I give my PAN number there. So in that case, instead of one global ID, I will have multiple IDs, but these are tagged to either PAN number or voter ID, which belong to me only. So what I need is, instead of having a direct mapping between global identifier and the local identifier, I can have a mapping between an index of identifiers. And this index of identifier can have multiple identifiers. It can have voter ID, Aadhaar ID, whatever number. Aadhaar ID is not captured actually. Vote, PAN card, voter ID, whatever. And I can be identified that manner. So till that time, patient registry comes in, we should consider that there should be a federated ID model. We should ask all the provider systems to capture any one of the government ID. Number one. Number two, we should have a index existing of all the government IDs, and all the local IDs should be mapped to any of the government ID. So that way, person can be identified. Now, same case happens in facility registry. So facility registry, you have 3 IDs today. But ultimately, all these 3 IDs are linked to some facility, some physical facility. So instead of having one facility ID, you can have a set of IDs here. So one is the NIN number, then another is the Rohini number for the same facility, the third is the NHRR generated number for the same facility. So we should have an index of the 3 IDs rather than one single. And instead of maintaining a facility registry till the time it comes in, we should be maintaining the indexes of all these IDs.
तो इससे डेटा डुप्लीकेशन वगैरह नहीं हो रहा, काम नहीं बढ़ रहा है?
बढ़ तो रहा है, पर जब तक actual problem तो be solved only when you have the registry. But I am answering you that till the time registry comes in, what will happen? I am not saying this is a solution in long term.
Yes, sir. तो सर जैसे हमने कल एक प्राइमरी की का कॉन्सेप्ट पढ़ा था, तो हम एक प्राइमरी की से बाकी सारी आईडीज को या किसी चीज को लिंक नहीं कर सकते? लाइक हमारे पेशेंट रिकॉर्ड्स अलग अलग जगह है, बट हमारा अगर प्राइमरी की हमारे पास अवेलेबल है तो हम उससे भी तो देख सकते हैं records.
Actually, basically, what I'm trying to say is, instead of having one single primary key, you can have a composite key.
Okay, sir.
So your primary key can be consisting of a combination of things rather than one single field. So instead of one single global identifier, you can have, let us say, 3 identifiers. All 3 are part of your primary key.
Okay, sir.
Now you can have either PAN number, you can have either voter ID, you can have either whatever driving license, but ultimately all these things related to me only, na? As a person. So along with a local ID, I should have any of the existing government ID, and that is why MDDS had a field called alternate identifier type.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And this was the only reason, because Aadhaar is not mandatory in the country. If Aadhaar became mandatory, then solve everything. Or master person index comes in and it solve everything.
सर आधार मैंडेटरी नहीं है, बट हर जगह पे सिर्फ आधार के थ्रू ही सब कुछ होता है. अगर आधार नहीं है
आधार
won't even open your bank account.
Raghav, Aadhaar is only for authentication.
Okay.
So you cannot store the Aadhaar number. You can only store the outcome of the authentication transaction. So उसके साथ साथ एक e-KYC होता है.
हाँ जी.
So maybe you can make e-KYC compulsory, and similar to e-KYC, maybe you can ask the other ID related e-KYC also. तो आजकल आधार तो ऑलमोस्ट सब लोगों के पास है ना, तो e-KYC अगर हम कर देते हैं कि लेट अस से पेशेंट रजिस्ट्रेशन में e-KYC होगा, and the integration with the Aadhaar e-KYC API, so that will be helping to authenticate कि it is the same person. So different IDs can be mapped to one single government ID somewhere.
Okay.
My question was, anonymization. So anonymization and deduplication. So these are the two things which NDHB is talking about, and they are saying clearly, if you see the bottom of this page, a combination of data protection techniques like anonymization, deduplication, de-identification, encryption, and strong responsibilities on data fiduciaries and data processors, in addition to consent manager, is recommended, as no single technique would take care of all eventualities. So what they're saying is, National Health Stack, they propose the model of Health Data Fiduciary Access Framework and HDAF. Now, if you see the health claim platform technical specification, again, because that HDAF is developed by iSprit only, so they are proposing the same thing there also. So HDAF, they are bringing the concept of data fiduciaries, and data fiduciaries are going to be responsible for managing the repositories of data on behalf of provider systems, and they will be responsible for encrypting the data or ensuring the privacy, security, or the consent of the data. They will be made responsible for that. So data protection bill, lot of provisions will come in related to fiduciaries. So anonymization is basically one difference is anonymization. I will remove all the patient identification related identifiers from the data set before I exchange with the rest of the systems. So all the PHI identifiers like patient name, his gender, mobile number, address. So all the identifiable attributes need to be anonymized. They will be removed out. De-identification means I will be keeping them, but I will be encrypting it in a manner that it can be decrypted only by the trusted party. So the only difference between anonymization and de-identification is anonymization is irreversible. Once I have anonymized the data, I cannot get it back. I cannot de-anonymize it. But de-identification means once I have encrypted the identifiers, I should be able to decrypt it back. So I should be able to revoke it. So what NDHB is talking about is whenever you are exchanging the data, like for example e-objects. So whenever we are exchanging the e-objects, all the patient-related data, PHI data, that should be sort of de-identified or anonymized. So I will prefer de-identification, because if you need to recover that data back for some reason, then you should be able to de-identify that. Or for example, payer want to know where this claim has come from. Like in the reimbursement claim, they need to know the person mobile number. They need to know the person identity as well, gender as well, because they need to know the gender in order to adjudicate the claim. So you cannot completely anonymize that. But when you are exchanging the e-claim object, you need to sort of kind of de-identify that, so that later at the payer system, they can be re-identified. And this data privacy, security, whatever standards we will define the mechanisms of encrypting, decrypting the data. Same is a consent manager. But if you see the one problem, MIT has given a consent based specification document. It is available in the domain. But the only challenge with that document is it talks about the usage of mobile and smartphones to do the consenting part, like OTP based or something. Now the problem in that is, there are two problems in that. One is, how will you receive the consent if somebody is not carrying a smartphone? Because smartphone penetration is still low. Most of the poor population, they are carrying the very local kind of phones. They are not keeping the basic features. And even more than that, the problem is the internet problem. So at the low-lying rural areas, you have the internet problem. So you cannot expect, online, mobile services available everywhere. And this is a problem we faced in Rajasthan. And that is why their IT team developed a different model for their clinics, which was a chip-based storage of data. Because they found that in far, desert areas kind of thing, internet connectivity was an issue. So then if you make consent mandatory, and if we follow the MIT structure for the consent framework, or even the iSprit structure for that, they're all based on mobile and smartphone usage. And that is expecting, mobile connectivity to be made online all the time, which cannot happen in India. So we have to propose a consent solution which take care of online offline mechanisms both. Then they talk about health locker. So again, health locker is PHR basically, and we are already talking with our SCA members on the PHR design. So one of the fundamental things they talk about, and I will like to read it for you basically, if it is somewhere. So the health locker is a standard-based interoperability specification that can be implemented by multiple players to enable the electronic health record ecosystem. And the health lockers enable creation of a longitudinal health record from the various links it stores and provide the EHR to the providers who need the same. So basically what they are talking about is, and one more thing they are talking about is, small clinics and hospitals are expected to subscribe to the authorized repository providers who can integrate with the health locker to be able to participate in this ecosystem. So it means they're clearly talking about some authorized repository providers, number one. And all the access to the PHR will happen through the authorized. So all the hospitals and small clinics will be subscribing to the repository providers, and these repository providers will be integrating with the health locker. It is not direct integration between hospital and the health locker per se. This is what NDHB is talking about. I'm reading in front of you. The other thing they are saying is health locker enables creation of a longitudinal health record from various links it stores. Now, this is another point, I will request everyone's attention. From the various links it stores. So what they are saying is the actual records may not be needed to store in the PHR. The links of the records need to be stored in that. So what it means is PHR should be acting like a conduit, and it should be yesterday, I think day before yesterday, Dr. Pankaj was showing this Canada Infoway architecture thing. So there was a record locator service in that. So all the exchanges will need a record locator service which actually identify the location of the record and help to fetch that record based on the push or pull. So what they are trying to say here is PHR should be containing the links of all the records which are actually stored in the authorized repository providers, which are fiduciaries. Yes. So after getting the consent of the patient, if patient want to exchange it to any other entity, using that link, they can fetch the data from the source system and they can actually share the link to the other entity rather than sharing actual record. Now this links can be linked to any clinical record or any DICOM or any other related record. So one of the question comes here is again it is expecting the online services to be up because if PHR will work this way that it has a link. Now based on the link it will identify where my record, which repository my record is, and it will fetch the record. Then my online service should be, service should be online all the time. So what will happen if my service is not online? Internet is a problem. So then PHR should have a storage of some common clinical records of the patient, like for example, last 2 visits or last 3 visits, whatever. It can be stored in the PHR, and there should be other mechanisms given to the patient also, like the NFC based, chip based storage and those things. Those will also come in the purview of PHR. So this is the example which Rajasthan followed.
So a repository and locker are the same thing? Or?
नहीं तो अभी आज के टाइम में क्या है कि राघव you have a DigiLocker ना?
हाँ जी sir.
Have you read about DigiLocker?
Yes sir I have.
तो DigiLocker में क्या होता है कि यूनिवर्सिटी जो होता है, let us say one example is कि यूनिवर्सिटी I got one code from a university and they gave my certificate there, है ना? तो उनके यूनिवर्सिटी सर्वर पे पड़ा हुआ है. अब उसके बाद में when I apply for a job, I need to submit my educational documents to the respective HR. तो आज की डेट में तो सब मैनुअल होता है ना. तो लॉकर क्या करता है कि लॉकर will register the links of all the documents which are actually stored on the authorized repositories. And let us say now I want to share my record with any HR. एक्सेस हेल्थ के HR के साथ मैं शेयर करना चाहता हूँ, तो आई विल नॉट शेयर द डॉक्यूमेंट, आई विल शेयर द लिंक. So one link will go to Bela's email, and because you know that I am sending, so already my consent is there. And when she kind of click that link, she will be able to fetch that document directly from the repository where university records are stored.
Okay.
So the answer of your question is repository is a kind of database. Health locker is again a virtual storage, which is more kind of controlled by me. So it's like my partition on the storage. तो जैसे आप वो होता है ना, होटल में जाते हो एक लॉकर होता है, यू कैन कीप योर वैल्यूएबल्स इनसाइड द लॉकर, वो आपका एक चाबी बंद करके आपको दे देंगे ये आपका है. तो इट्स एग्जैक्टली लाइक दैट. इट्स अ क्लाउड रिपोजिटरी, क्लाउड स्टोरेज. उसको वर्चुअल पार्टीशन कर दिया आपने, और हमने बोल दिया हर एक पार्टीशन का हमने एक आईडी नंबर दे दिया. तो वी सेड कि ये राघव का आईडी नंबर है, यहाँ पर राघव का जो भी डॉक्यूमेंट स्टोर है या लिंक स्टोर है वो राघव के कंट्रोल में है. तो राघव कैन टेक अ चॉइस कि किसके साथ वो शेयर करना चाहते हैं.
ठीक है.
रिपोजिटरी इज तो अगेन ये भी एक तरह की रिपोजिटरी है, बट इट कैन बी अ रिपोजिटरी, इट कैन बी अ रजिस्ट्री, और इट कैन बी बोथ. रजिस्ट्री होगी अगर इसमें सिर्फ लिंक्स स्टोर होंगी, रिपोजिटरी होगा अगर आप लिंक्स के साथ साथ कुछ क्लिनिकल डॉक्यूमेंट भी अलाउ करते हो कि भाई लास्ट 2 विजिट का डाटा भी स्टोर करें इसमें. और इट कैन बी प्योरली रिपोजिटरी आल्सो. सो जो यूनिमेडनेट का है उनका प्योरली रिपोजिटरी है. वो क्या करते हैं कि वो लेट अस से ऑल द डाइकॉम फाइल्स और व्हाटएवर PDF फाइल्स आर जनरेटेड, दे प्रोवाइड अ पुशर एट द हॉस्पिटल साइड. तो पुशर से वो सारा पुश करके, अब उसमें एक चैलेंज तो ये आएगा कि वन पेशेंट कैन हैव मल्टीपल लॉकर्स, और हर एक लॉकर में मैंने अपने इतने रिकॉर्ड लेके डाल दिए. तो आई हैव सो मेनी प्लेसेस वेयर माय क्लिनिकल डॉक्यूमेंट्स एग्जिस्ट. तो प्राइवेसी सिक्योरिटी का क्या होगा उसका, नंबर 1. नंबर 2 ये है कि मेरा अब डुप्लीकेशन ऑफ रिकॉर्ड्स हो गई हर जगह पे. अगर मैं एक डॉक्यूमेंट में अपडेट करता हूं तो आई नीड टू अपडेट ऑल द लोकेशंस. और अगर सब जगह पे लोकेट नहीं हुआ, हर जगह पे अपडेट नहीं हुआ, तो कुछ जगह पे अपडेटेड होगा, कुछ जगह पे अपडेटेड नहीं होगा. ये सब प्रॉब्लम्स आएंगी. तो मेजर चैलेंजेस हैं which nobody has thought of. So the recommendation is that instead of storing the actual records, we should be storing the links of the records. और आपके रिकॉर्ड जो है वो आपके एक्चुअल ऑथराइज्ड रिपोजिटरीज में एग्जिस्ट करते हैं, तो जो भी अपडेशन होगी वहां हो जाएगी उसकी. तो इट्स वन सिंगल प्लेस एंड इट विल बी अपडेटेड एवरीवेयर. एनी क्वेश्चंस ऑन दैट? So I think information exchange and analytics I will cover in separate session. The other building blocks are simple ones. The one is the application building block. तो NDHB क्या बोल रहे हैं कि you have a infrastructure block, then a layer, then on top of that you have the data layer जहाँ पर आपके सारा data standardization होगा, data hubs create होंगे, repositories create होंगी, lockers create होंगे. Then on top of that you have the technical layer. Technology layer में you will have the different components like anonymizer.
Your voice is breaking up, Krishna.
Sorry, sir. So is it audible now? Hello?
Arun, we can actually hear Krishna.
Yes, your voice is clear for us.
Okay. So Arun, for you, am I clear or still problem? I think there is some problem at the Arun side. So technology layer will have all the services basically. Anonymizer as a service or consent manager as a service. So they are talking about the cloud services which can be used by multiple applications. Then on top of that, they are talking about application layer. So application can be any application which is developed by any vendor. So these building blocks are kind of the supporting layers to build the application, and that has to be consumed by different applications. Now application में जो भी बना रहे हैं, तो they are talking about open standards, open API standards. They are not talking about कि application कौन सी बननी है. You can make any application by private or public vendor. So now कुछ थोड़ा उन्होंने बोला इसमें कि application across emergency care, health care, wellness, medical education, public health, that is expected basically. And government managed side applications, they are talking about RCH, Nixche, HMIS, IDSP. And telemedicine should be given a high priority given the low doctor population issues. Some of the things they are talking about. Then they are talking about a near real-time electronic information system, integrated health information platform, IHIP, for surveillance. तो अब यहाँ पे क्लियरली वो बोल रहे हैं कि IHIP is required for IDSP. So if you see this line. And the final layer is basically the access and delivery layer. So access and delivery layer is a different channels through which these applications can be accessed. So it can be through web browser, it can be through mobiles. So they are clearly talking about mobile first and the cloud first strategy. So I will cover it more tomorrow in the design principles. So mobile first में भी again one question comes is कि स्मार्टफोन तो बहुत कम लोगों के पास होता है, तो वी शुड बी कंसीडरिंग द एप्लीकेशन फॉर ऑल टाइप ऑफ मोबाइल्स, इवन सिंपल वंस के लिए. तो जब हम कोई भी मोबाइल एप्लीकेशन की बात कर रहे हैं तो वी कैन नॉट कंसीडर कि जो फीचर स्मार्टफोन में अवेलेबल होगा वो सभी मोबाइल्स में होगा. दैट इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट टू बी टेकन केयर ऑफ. एंड देन along with these different layers, horizontal layers, there is a standard related thing. तो स्टैंडर्ड में ये सारे स्टैंडर्ड्स आपके आ जाते हैं जो टर्मिनोलॉजी स्टैंडर्ड्स हैं, ICD 10 और 11. सो नाउ दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट ICD 11 NHA में फॉर ऑल द डायग्नोसिस, SNOMED CT फॉर ऑल द क्लिनिकल थिंग्स, लॉइंग फॉर ऑल द लैब रिलेटेड थिंग्स. तो ये सारे आपके स्टैंडर्ड्स में. एंड देन ऑल द आइडेंटिफायर शुड कम फ्रॉम रजिस्ट्रीज लाइक दैट. एंड फाइनली दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट ए कमांड एंड कंट्रोल सेंटर थिंग. So what they are saying is that there will be a command and control center set up by the government, which will monitor all the transactions and kind of ensure and flag the violations in security, privacy and the consent thing. तो अगर कोई ट्रांजेक्शन बिना कंसेंट के हुई है तो उस कमांड एंड कंट्रोल सेंटर में रिपोर्ट हो जाएगी. So that can happen only when there is a artificial intelligence and machine learning based platform. It cannot be done manually actually. Sure. So that is another model which government is emphasizing, and there will be clear penalties for the parties who are violating the security, privacy or consent related aspects. And then overall this thing they have a separate chapter dedicated to federated architecture and the health analytics thing. I will cover it in more detail once that class will happen. And then rest of the chapters are all the institution related things. And the timeline related thing. What is missing is basically the regulations. So NDHB need to sync up with all the different regulations. A lot of new regulations need to be built to enforce the implementation of all these layers. Otherwise, nobody will do that. So any questions, sir? So that's all from my side. So any questions? So Arun, I think I bored the people enough. Like nobody's even talking.
Thanks. This has been very helpful. Even been very helpful, Christian.
So my submission is, all of you read the NDHB report word by word again, because there are a lot of interpretations in a different manner written there, and we need to work upon those things. Maybe with ministry, or we need to evolve the solutions, how we can address those things. Only then it can be implemented.
There are several areas coming out which need work.
So, Krishan, thank you very much for this. I think what you have done wonderfully is to highlight the gaps in the understanding of NDHB as far as our team is concerned, because that was the purpose that, if everybody believes I know NDHB, then, nobody is going to sit and read and reread and, so this document clearly requires reading of at least 5 to 7 times before you can, say that I've got it. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that is what is required to be done by the team collectively, individually, and then debate on it. So what I would suggest is, as a follow-up to this session, we need to have debating sessions internally on chapter by chapter.
Sure.
So fully agreed, and I think the important components of the NDHB, we should have a very comprehensive debate and some solutions coming out of that.
Yeah, there are some actions coming out of this because clearly there are gaps.
So this was a different perspective I wanted to share with the team because we have kind of presented NDHB a lot of times. So now I wanted to present in a gap perspective manner.
Yeah, absolutely. That helps.
This is our fundamental duty to actually realize and identify these gaps and suggest solutions, come up with solutions for it.
Yeah, but then we also have to highlight that NDHB does a very beautiful job of bringing the discussion to the table for the need of NDHM.
Yeah. So that's the elephant in the room. What do we do about NDHM?
Right. So, but then NDHB, this is something which no previous document actually was able to achieve. That this document was at least able to bring it to the table as an agenda item for discussion across all the stakeholders.
Well, let's face it, it's too large an issue for a small team of half a dozen people who have written this to actually visualize everything that we are discussing today. It does need broader analysis and stuff like that, and which is a good thing. They provide us a starting point, which is very well done, covers a lot of ground. But sure, there is stuff that needs to improve upon, which is a continuous process.
Yeah, and also what this document beautifully does is it gives pointers for people to ponder.
Yeah, that was the original purpose, and then they had these consultations. Maybe at the end of our debating sessions, we would come up with a long or short list of stuff that is missing or needs to be done, and then we can get various stakeholders to raise it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because ultimately that has to come out and be debated in the open, and the more people debating it, the wider the ownership. It's not only for Access Digital to own it, the nation has to own it.
Correct, absolutely. And given the current scenario, the digital health design and governance issues have been, exposed to the core. So not just India, globally.
Everywhere in the world. This is a global problem, and we are fortunate that we don't have much to undo. Most people will have a lot of stuff to undo. So it brings me to the point that there was this article we had started on how digital health can help deal with things like epidemics and disasters. I shared a draft. Has anyone looked at it?
I may have, but I don't think I've done much on it.
Yeah, because that's something that needs to come out for debate right now. This is the right time to bring it out in the public for debate. Otherwise, what will happen? Events will have come and gone, and which still not have made any progress. We'll still come back to the same issues that we are grappling with today. So, in the urgency and heat of the moment, maybe something will get done, or at least register in the right minds.
Sure.
So we need to sort of put that out with someone else who will make some noise about it, whichever way. That's a strategy thing, but the content first.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, so
absolutely agree.
Shall I resend that draft to everyone? Would everyone?
Yeah, I think we need to relook at it from the current perspective. Like for example, Krishan started with the point of COVID registry. Now, COVID registry is a key word, but what does it entail? It entails all the master data behind it, all the master person index behind it. Now, where is it? So, we have to look at it or relook at many of these discussions from that perspective.
And the kind of depth that we need to bring this out in is basically going to need different people in the team to look at different areas, so that we are specific in what we say. What I've written is a fairly general sort of paper, obviously, because I'm not a technical expert here, right? But if we can sort of, bring out points which are actionable, then we have made some progress.
Yeah, agreed.
Let me circulate that draft again.
Sure.
And please, everyone, take a look at it critically and sharpen it, please. We'll be doing a great service to the nation.
Yep, sounds good. So 2:00 we regroup to study HL7 and interoperability. So that will be another very good session to go through.
Very important.
Yep.
Great job. Helped very much. You have my respect.
Krishan has everybody's respect, no doubt about it. What he's achieved in his life is no joke.
To be able to look at it something critically and bring out the lacunae, which we were treating as the Bible so far.
Sure.
Yeah. So Krishan, great job. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks everyone.